Imagine families pulled from their homes at gunpoint, the old and the young driven into stockades, then forced west along a trail where thousands would never finish the journey. At the same time, a president stood against his own vice president over the power of the states, while far to the southwest, a small garrison held out for 13 days against impossible odds. Welcome to History in Decades. I'm Jim Rand. Today, we walk through the years 1830 to 1840, the decade of Andrew Jackson's democracy, the Trail of Tears, the nullification crisis, the rise of Texas, and a financial panic that taught ordinary families how fragile prosperity can be. The decade opened with Jackson already in the White House. He had been elected as the champion of the common man. More white men could vote than ever before. Political parties were becoming machines that answered to popular will. Jackson believed the people, not the old elite, should steer the nation. Yet one of his first major acts reached far beyond the ballot box. In May 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act. Jackson signed it. The law authorized the federal government to exchange lands east of the Mississippi for territory farther west. Treaties followed. Some negotiated under pressure, some signed by minority factions. The Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole were pushed toward what is now Oklahoma. The Cherokee resisted longest, taking their case to the Supreme Court. They won important legal arguments. They still lost their homeland. In 1838, federal troops and state militias rounded up the Cherokee. Families cooking supper were forced out at bayonet point. Homes and fields were left behind. People were held in crowded stockades through a brutal summer. When the long march finally began, it stretched through rain, cold, and disease. Roughly 4,000 Cherokee died along the way. Survivors later called it the Trail of Tears, for the families forced to walk it. This was not policy. It was the end of a world. While that removal unfolded, another crisis nearly tore the Union apart from within. Southern planters hated the high protective tariffs that sheltered Northern industry. South Carolina, led in spirit by John C. Calhoun, claimed a state could nullify a federal law it judged unconstitutional. In late 1832, a state convention declared the tariffs of 1828 and 1832 null and void inside South Carolina's borders. They threatened secession if the federal government tried to collect the duties. Jackson answered with steel. He prepared the Army and Navy. He issued a proclamation insisting the Union was permanent and that nullification was treason. Congress passed a force bill authorizing military action. At the same time, Henry Clay worked out a compromise tariff that gradually lowered the rates. South Carolina rescinded its ordinance. The crisis passed, yet the argument over state power versus national authority had been rehearsed in public. It would return. Jackson also waged war on the Second Bank of the United States. He saw it as a privileged monopoly that favored the wealthy few over the many. When Congress voted to recharter the bank early, Jackson vetoed the bill. He won re-election in 1832, largely on that fight. He then ordered federal deposits removed and placed in selected state banks. Speculation surged, land prices soared. Jackson answered with the Specie Circular, requiring payment for public land in gold or silver. Credit tightened. In May 1837, the system cracked. Banks suspended specie payments. The Panic of 1837 spread across the country. Businesses failed. Workers lost jobs. Farmers watched crop prices collapse. Ordinary families who had borrowed to buy land or expand shops suddenly faced ruin. The hard times lasted years. Prosperity that rests on paper and speculation can vanish overnight. Meanwhile, the question of slavery grew sharper. In 1831, William Lloyd Garrison began publishing The Liberator in Boston, calling for immediate emancipation. That same year, Nat Turner led a short, bloody rebellion of enslaved people in Virginia. White Southerners responded with tighter controls and deeper fear. Congress eventually adopted a gag rule to table anti-slavery petitions without debate. The moral argument and the political defense of the institution were hardening against each other. Far to the southwest, a different struggle unfolded. American settlers in Mexican Texas rebelled. In early 1836, Mexican forces under Santa Anna besieged the Alamo. After 13 days, the garrison fell. Davy Crockett, Jim Bowie, and the others died. Weeks later, Sam Houston's army surprised the Mexicans at San Jacinto and won a decisive victory. Texas declared itself an independent republic. The United States watched carefully. Annexation would come later, but the dream of continental expansion had taken a new form. Across the ocean, the world was also changing. France's July Revolution of 1830 brought a new citizen king. Belgium won independence. Britain passed the Great Reform Act of 1832, expanding the vote and abolished slavery throughout its empire in 1833. Young Queen Victoria took the throne in 1837. The First Opium War between Britain and China began near the end of the decade. Steam power, railroads, and new ideas of popular government were spreading. Back home, the market revolution continued. Canals and early railroads moved goods faster. Mechanical reapers and steel plows began to change farming. Cities grew. Immigrants arrived in larger numbers. Faith movements flourished. The Second Great Awakening still stirred hearts. And in 1830, Joseph Smith organized what became the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Ordinary people were building lives, churches, and communities even as national storms gathered. Notable figures. Andrew Jackson dominated the decade. The old Indian fighter and war hero became the face of a more popular politics. He expanded the presidency's reach, rewarded loyal supporters, and never doubted that he spoke for the people. His strengths and his harshness both left deep marks. Henry Clay remained the great compromiser. He helped diffuse the nullification crisis and continued to push his American system of tariffs, banks, and internal improvements. He lost the 1832 election to Jackson but never stopped trying to hold the Union together through negotiation. John C. Calhoun moved from vice president to the leading defender of states' rights and Southern interests. His theory of nullification forced the nation to confront how far a state could go against federal law. Sam Houston, the former Tennessee governor who had lived among the Cherokee, led Texas to victory at San Jacinto and became the new republic's first president. His story tied frontier ambition to national destiny. Among those born or coming of age, the decade produced future shapers of industry and culture, men like John D. Rockefeller, born in 1839, and artists and writers who would later give the country its own voice. Closing reflection: why does this decade still matter? Because it shows how quickly democratic energy, territorial ambition, and economic experiment can collide. Jackson's age widened participation for many white men while closing doors and trails for Native nations. The nullification crisis tested whether the Union could survive deep disagreement over power and interest. The Panic of 1837 reminded families that boom and bust are never abstract. Texas Rising pointed toward a continental future that would bring both opportunity and conflict. Ordinary people lived through all of it. They cleared land, planted crops, buried children on the trail west, lost shops in the panic, and kept churches and neighborhoods going when national politics felt distant or dangerous. The lesson is not that expansion is always wrong or that strong leadership is always right. It is that choices made in the name of progress carry costs that fall unevenly, and that those costs do not disappear simply because a generation moves on. Stability isn't given to us. It must be guarded by vigilant, self-reliant people who are committed to passing it on to the next generation. That work belongs to every generation, including ours. This has been History in Decades. I'm Jim Rand. If you're finding value in these episodes, please take a moment to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It really helps the podcast grow. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who would appreciate learning from the past. That's how we build something meaningful together. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay rooted in the lessons history provides.